An elementary conjunction is a propositional logic well-formed formula of the form a sub 1 and a sub 2 and a sub n, where n is greater than or equal to 1, and where each one of those a's are literal well-formed formulas. Let's look at some examples. Let's start by looking at a case where n is equal to 1. That is, we're looking at a formula that is simply a proposition. In order for simply a formula or proposition to be an elementary conjunction, we see that it has to be a literal. So what this means is a formula like P, not Q, R, not S, all of these would be elementary conjunctions. And again, the reason is they are a formula, and that formula is a literal. Let's look at a case where n is greater than 1. So this would be a formula of the form a sub 1 and a sub 2 and all the way up to a sub n. And each one of these a's needs to be a literal well-formed formula. So if we had, let's say, not P and Q, we'll notice that each one of these conjuncts is a literal well-formed formula. And so this would be an elementary conjunction. Also take a look at, let's say, not P and not Q and not R. Notice each one of these conjuncts is a literal well-formed formula. And so this also would be an elementary conjunction. Let's look at one more example. Let's say we had P and Q and not R and not S. Well, notice that this formula has the form a sub 1 and a sub 2 and a sub 3 and a sub 4. And notice that when we look at each one of the a's, each one of the conjuncts of this formula, we see each one is a literal. And so that would mean that this particular formula is also an elementary conjunction. Let's look at some examples of formulas that are not elementary conjunctions. A simple case would be P right arrow Q. P right arrow Q is not an elementary conjunction. And the reason for this is because if we treat it as a single formula, a sub 1, then it is not a literal. And remember, in order for a single formula to be an elementary conjunction, it needs to be a literal formula. But since this is not a literal formula, it's not a propositional letter or its negation, then it is not an elementary conjunction. One thing that you might say is, well, look, P is a literal and Q is a literal. Why isn't this an elementary conjunction? The answer here is if we treat it as the form a sub 1 and a sub 2, one thing that we see is that the formula is not a conjunction. Notice the main operator here is this right arrow, whereas in order for it to be an elementary conjunction, it needs to be a conjunction of literals. So this would not be an elementary conjunction because the formula is not even a conjunction. Let's look at one more example. Let's say we had not P. Well, this particular formula would not be an elementary conjunction. The rationale is the same. If we treat it as a single formula, well, since it's not a literal, then it is not an elementary conjunction. Or if we said that it has the form a sub 1 and a sub 2, well, the first thing to note is that this particular formula here is not a conjunction. And so since it is not a conjunction of literals, this formula here would not be an elementary conjunction. So not P is not an elementary conjunction.